I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Seek and ye shall find. Have you heard that? That's how the aphorism goes. Not speculate and you shall find, or troll and you shall find, or criticize and you shall find. Seek and you shall find. That is what is missing right now in this case. I think the search for Jay Slater is a timely example of how not to search for a missing person, right? Has the search been successful so far? Yes or no? Well, how do you have an unsuccessful search? Well, that's what we're going to examine in this analysis. Let's examine why and again where to go from here. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So how do you not search for someone? Well, it's quite simple. You don't actually search, right? You don't actually search. That's how you not search for someone. And if you want to be guaranteed to not find them, well, don't search. Another way to guarantee that you don't find someone is that you're absolutely certain that you know exactly what happened. In other words, you're not curious, you're not looking, you're not open to new information. You're absolutely sure of either that you're not going to find them or that you know exactly where they are, but of course you don't actually search for them. Now, journalists tend to think of a case like this as a developing story. Right now, it's still unfolding, right? And up until a few days ago, I think there was a fairly strong chance that Jay could still actually have been alive if he was out there. And meanwhile, what are people doing? Bickering amongst themselves. I mean, this is a time-critical case. And I must say, for me, it's unreal just the amount of noise, chatter, and bile that's going on in the background. Or is it the foreground? When the focus should really be quite simple. Search for Jay. I saw a brief clip a few moments ago of someone who criticized the cops for doing a PR exercise. That person was doing a live report themselves onto social media while he was doing his search. Now, I can't think of a single Spanish searcher who did that. I would say the number one enemy of a proper focused search is losing focus. Focus on what you know, and we know a lot here. We know where his phone last pinged. And then what do? You carefully and systematically search in a concentric spiral or a sort of a radiating pattern from that ping point, especially in a 2-mile radius. And if you get to the exterior, as you go out, obviously you start having greater and greater terrain that is harder to search as you radiate outwards because you've got more territory to cover. If you get to the edge of that 2-mile radius, you then step somewhat inward and you come all the way back, and you repeat that on and on and on until you find, see if you can find anything. And then if you don't, then you might want to extend it to perhaps 3 miles, 4 miles. And what you want to do is make sure to check all areas where there are natural freshwater reservoirs. What is the number one thing someone who's out in the wilderness is going to need? Water. Is it possible the ping position is off due to the tall mountains? Is it something that is misleading the search to some extent? Because it's quite important that you do have an accurate last ping point, that it is accurate. I know that happens in Manhattan. I know when I did some GPS mapping, it kind of scrambled the route that I took. So, maybe in the mountains, it might throw GPS signal off more than usual as well. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the great enemy of a missing person search is distraction. If you want to search and not actually, even if you're searching and not actually find something, even though it's there, well, be distracted while you're searching. Have you ever looked for your keys and you sort of look under clothes, maybe on your phone at the time, and you end up having to look again and again and again. Eventually you realize, wow, I'd looked here, I just needed to look properly. And I'm sure that that could be the case here. And so what is causing distraction here? Well, the media and social media. The media and social media excel at distraction. And I think, a protocol, if you've got any morals, a protocol you might have is to say, is what I'm doing here part of the solution, or is it distraction? And I think I can put up my hand and say, with my hand on my heart, that I think what I'm doing is helpful and part of helping in terms of a solution. It's not distraction. I would also say you want to keep the search as private as possible so that you can focus on what you're doing. We also know that Jay caught a ride with two individuals he just met. So there is reason, there's no reason to think he wouldn't attempt something similar if he could from Moscow. Obviously, what I'm talking about here is the chance that he may have hitchhiked. I hitchhiked as a kid, maybe, and I don't think he would have been opposed to it. I just don't think a kidnapper happened to be lurking about at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning, but I guess it's possible. So in that respect, I think the cops could examine CCTV and get a sense of all the vehicles that entered and left the area on Monday morning up until, say, 10 a.m. It shouldn't be that hard, and they can maybe check license plates and follow up. It shouldn't be that hard because there's a very limited number of roads through there, and I'm sure that there are some CCTV cameras angled towards those roads. A good way to start not searching is to imagine sightings all over the place. That happened here. I think there were at least 2 of them, but fortunately not quite as horribly as it did in the Madeleine McCann case. I can't quite remember the number, but I think the sightings went up to something like 10,000, where folks all over the world suddenly saw Madeleine walking across their streets. Again, publicizing your search in the modern age means the search gets pulled into many different directions. If you want someone to be found, let's put it this way. If you want someone not to be found, this is the way to do it. Make it extremely public and have people send in their clues, which tends to more often than not be misinformation. If you want someone to be found, on the other hand, get people into that area, experts, expertise, resources, and look. If you want someone not to be found, get those resources out there and spread yourself thin. And this also happened in the Nora Corrin case. The key trait in a successful missing persons search is consistency and even continuity. You want to build on what you learned the day before. You want to keep at it. You want to kind of get into a rhythm. You want to exclude certain things. You want to start to include certain possibilities you hadn't considered before. And so what is it? Seek and ye shall find. Keep seeking and don't lose heart. Gloria Clark, a British woman who went missing on New Year's Eve last year, took 3 months to find her body, even though authorities had CCTV of exactly when and where she entered a nearby river. It took 3 weeks to find Virginia Woolf's body. So the focus needs to continue to be on searching. Search first, speculate later. Of course, that's not how social media works. Speculate first and don't really worry about the searching, because as soon as the person's found, then the show's over. No, search first, speculate later. I would like to know if that Playa Gorge hike has been properly searched, the Muska Gorge hike, if that has been properly searched. Anyway, let's go to the default narrative. Look, it's human nature to want easy answers. All of us are that way. We don't want to waste time and energy going down, well, you would think so, going down dead ends and rabbit holes. We want to kind of cut to the chase. Here's the problem. What's the solution? We want short, simple, quick, easy answers. When the questions are simple, where's Jay? We want a simple answer. But often the simplest questions have the hardest and most difficult and even most confounding answers, and that doesn't make us feel very, very good. Think about simple questions like, where do we come from? For example, again, where is Jay Slater? And so when we don't have an answer, we've looked and we simply can't find him. After 15 days, he remains missing. Well, it's tempting to sort of invent a convenient solution. It's tempting to solve the problem kind of by cheating, where you say something that seems to make sense if you don't think about it. It's a convenient solution, but it's not one supported by the facts. So it kind of gives you a sense of reassurance that you know what's going on, and everyone around you is also beating the same drum. But of course, it's not a solution. And of course, that's exactly what's happening. You have headlines like this one. Spanish police hunting for Jay Slater must re-examine Airbnb where he was hours before disappearing and allow British officers to help, ex-Scotland Yard officer says. Well, the subtext to that is basically they need to think about the foul play thing. They need to rethink about a kidnapping. It doesn't add up, so it must mean there's foul play. That's, I think, from the Mail Online. There's another one from the Manchester Evening News. Ex-cop says Jay Slater might not be missing at all, which is another way of saying he's not there on that mountain. It's not an accident. And then says, as things don't add up, meaning it looks like foul play, right? And so to be explicit about it, quoting from the Manchester Evening News, the expert, I guess, this person who's saying this, has 30 years of experience at the Metropolitan Police, and he said that Jay may not actually be missing. It's incredible. That he's kind of saying the same thing that some people out there are saying, that he's actually back home. I'm not saying he's saying that explicitly, but using those words, he's not actually missing. Oh, okay. Is he hiding somewhere? Did he run away? The former policeman emphasized the importance for local authorities to consider basically criminal aspects of the case. So as soon as you do that, you are basically splitting whatever resources are in the search to that aspect. And we know that the position of if you read the local press, what they are saying is that the police believe that it is a missing persons case. And so if you force the police to have to split their resources, now you're breaking that singular focus. And I'm not saying search without results, like an idiot. You also need to be open to other possibilities. But you also need, in the beginning at least, the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, to have a singular focus on your best information. And then you can start sort of floating to other certain areas. But your priority in the beginning needs to be what you know and where, the where that you have certainty about. In this case, if you're going to talk about third-party involvement and a criminal aspect, and I'm not afraid to do that, but if you do, then are we dealing with a kidnapper that either forgot to ask for or collect a ransom? If you're saying Jay was kidnapped, was he kidnapped for a ransom? So they've just not decided to ask for one yet. They've just decided they don't really want a ransom now. And I guess we had the same thing in the Madeleine McCann and John Benet Ramsey cases, right? It's a kidnapping, but we ask for money, but we don't actually need to collect it. Or it's a kidnapping, but we're not really going to ask for a ransom. By the way, we will deal with the mind-fucking legacy of those cases in a minute. And if you didn't like that word, I hope so, because it's not very nice what has happened. Over the short term, the impact of the dubious foul play narrative is all too predictable. People start seeing spooks and goblins everywhere. Everything's a conspiracy, and suddenly Tenerife is no longer a safe place for Britons to go on holiday. That's the result of all of this chatter. Just as Praia da Luz in Portugal suddenly became a cesspool of paedophile abductors, while the McCann Circus was in that town. And then what happens? Well, it leads to the Ocean Club Hotel basically shutting down again in one of the lowest crime areas in Europe. And you had the same thing happening in Boulder. You had the mayor having to come out and say, to a spooked public, no, there's not a kidnapper on the loose. Calm down. Boulder is safe. Anyway, so there's been a headline, Britain's concerned for safety in Tenerife after missing Jay Slater. And so the reality is that Britain should be terrified of going home because the UK has the second highest crime rate by far in Europe. It's about double that of Spain, and Tenerife is actually a lot lower than Spain's average. So Britain should be terrified of going back home if they're worried about crime. It's also illuminating to look at Britain's drug culture relative to the rest of Europe. And I must say, thanks a lot for your feedback on the spliff versus cigarette thing. I see there are a huge amount of experts in this area. I'm sorry, I'm definitely not an expert. I'm definitely not an expert in that area. One area where I think you're a little bit mistaken is in Spain. It seems like there's quite a strong interest and trend in having filters attached to spliffs. You may or may not know that. It seems like, but it certainly is something that is often done in Spain. And just because you don't do it doesn't mean it's not done somewhere else. Drug deaths in Scotland are higher than any other European countries. It's actually significantly higher. It's also double the average in Britain. And if you want to look at serious crimes, and that's what we're talking about here, isn't it? It's not like a small little iffy little crime. It's a serious crime like murder or kidnapping. Well, look where UK is on that score. And look where Spain is on that score. Again, compare England and Wales to Spain. Scotland's murder rate is almost twice that of Spain's. Now, you might say, I don't really care about statistics. Well, when you have uncertainty, you should care about statistics, because statistics aren't going to give you an absolute answer, but they are going to provide a statistical likelihood. They're going to provide guidance. And certainly in terms of that, all of this speculation flies in the face of what that guidance suggests. And that then brings us to intuition in terms of why is all of this happening? What is the psychology of what's actually going on in this case? All the chatter, where's it coming from? And so that's what I call the preeminence and arrogance of man versus nature, because that's really what this is about. Did a teenager go into the mountains and die, or did something far more kind of evil take place? Some evil plot, including the criminal underworld, is it that, or is it someone walked into nature and something happened to them? Now, I don't mean to be mean, and I'm not judging this. It simply is human nature. I'm also not taking sides when I say this. This is simply how I see things from where I'm standing. You might see them differently. But the same superiority the Brits seem to feel towards the Spanish, and please don't say that's not the case. It definitely is the case. So let's say you disagree with me and you say they're not superior, but just for a moment accept that might be true. You might say it's not true, but what happens if you say, well, I wonder if it is true, then where does that take us, right? Well, it takes us to what happened with the Portuguese police, right? So that happened there as well. And guess what ultimately happened in that case? The lead detective was booted off the case. And I don't know if you know this, there's a long legal battle between him, Detective Amaral, and the McCanns. And that legal battle only just concluded about 2 years ago. That legal battle went on for about 14, 15 years. And it finally came to a head in September 2022. You know what was the result of that? Meanwhile, Madeleine remains missing. While all of this money is being spent on trials and blaming and all that kind of thing. Now, in the same way that the Brits feel superior to other European countries, don't they feel superior to nature? If you feel superior to other people, other cultures, other countries, isn't it just absolutely, it's like non-negotiable. we're far superior to nature. And I mean, we have a Brit, in a sense, is in an immense amphitheater of volcanic rock. It's one of the top 3 largest formations of this kind of volcanic structure on this planet. And there's the sense that, well, a teenager couldn't possibly have fallen here. He couldn't possibly have had an accident, as so often happens everywhere around the world. I mean, I've been going to quite a lot of America's national parks, and you constantly are seeing missing persons flyers and missing persons reports and articles. And so there must be some incredibly evil criminal conspiracy underway on an island that is arguably safer than Europe as a whole. And how we deal with that on this channel is we would say, okay, but does that make sense? I mean, that's the thing that's the kind of self-critical, self-examining measurement social media just is not capable of. It's where you basically try and use a little bit of self-awareness. Does that make sense? No, it's okay if it doesn't make sense. It's just so shocking. It's so terrible. It's all of this kind of thing. So if Jay was a victim of crime, and that is always a possibility, if a very small one, what is the motive? He had no money. He didn't have an expensive watch or expensive glasses. Surely it wasn't a sexual crime. I suppose it's possible. But I mean, if you say it was about money, well, no one has asked for money. And in the context of there's this huge GoFundMe, someone could say, hi, I've got Jay, I'd like 40,000 pounds, please. I know you have it. Why hasn't anyone asked for it? So, and was it a sexual crime? So if it's not about money, what is the point of the crime? Now, the reason Jay's parents struggle to see beyond a foul play scenario is similar, I think, to Riley Strain and his parents, because it's easier to do that. It's easier to blame the police, and now everyone can blame the Spanish police and someone else, some abductor. It's easier to do that than to imagine, let alone what may have really happened to Jay. If he's taken, then he might still be alive. If he's out there in the wilderness, he's unlikely to be alive. All in all, this choice prefers the idea of our preeminence over nature, our superiority over nature, our supremacy, our greatness, our distinction. In other words, we are like mountains towering over those very tall mountains. Really, are we? I think if you actually go there, those mountains are a lot higher. And instead of stepping over those mountains like supermen, I think if the reality is you would struggle to sort of move through the terrain where there are not paths or chains without slipping and falling. So really in that amphitheater, who are the giants? The mountains or the little people moving like ants under them? Because the alternative is truly terrifying, that we can be going about our lives and then boom, we discover it is possible to die without someone killing us or some evil criminal element out there. It is possible to die. We can slip at any moment. We aren't as strong or as immortal as we imagine ourselves to be. It is possible that suddenly somewhere nature can overwhelm us. It might be a virus. It might be a flood that sweeps us off our feet. There's big floods happening in I think it's Switzerland and parts of Italy right now. Or, you can have a mountain shooting up at the sky like a rocket, and we underestimate the angle of its slopes, and it causes us to stumble and fall down. We're not used to this kind of situation underfoot, and so we fall down into the basements of this mountain. But how can that be? I mean, we're able to fly in these incredible machines from one place to the other, and yet despite our techno-triumphalism, we're nowhere near as omnipotent and powerful as we imagine. It turns out we are not gods. It turns out we are food for worms, all of us. It's not a nice thought. And that brings us then to the legacy of the McCann case. You know, the great-grandfather of she's safe in the hands of the friendly kidnapper myth. Jay is safely in the hands of some abductor who's just playing kind of card games with him, and he'll let him go. Yeah, that myth comes from the Madeleine McCann case. Did you happen to scroll past the European country with the second highest crime rate on this chart to the one with the lowest, all the way at the bottom? Well, it's Portugal. I want to conclude just by quoting some stats, American stats, that around about 500,000 children are reported missing each year. And you might say, Jay's not a child, but children are basically regarded as people aged from basically 0 to 17 years old, right? 500,000 children go missing in America each year. How many of those missing children do you think are kidnapped? Well, guess what? Only 1 out of 10,000 is found not alive. 1 out of 10,000 not found alive. That's something like 0.01%. So a lot of the bleating you're hearing online is dealing with a statistical probability of around about 0.01%. That means 99% of missing children are returned home alive. The rate of missing children in Spain is 5 times, almost 6 times less than that of the United Kingdom. To conclude, you might say Jay wasn't a missing child, and that's true. Teenagers account for 81% of kidnapping victims. On that score, Jay was on the far end, no longer a child and almost no longer a teenager. Again, kidnappings in Spain are far lower than the UK and one of the lowest in the world, and I'd wager kidnappings in Tenerife are virtually unheard of. At the end of the day, we're going to find out, are the statistics in this case, were they good guidance after all or not? Or was the speculation on track all along? I'm not going to take it further than that. The search for Jay Slater in the mountains surrounding Musca continues, and tomorrow will be day 16. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.